All right, I just want to do a quick video showing you how to get a brochure template up in Photoshop. So I'm going to create a new file here, and I'm going to make this 11 inches wide and 8.5 inches tall. And we're going to do 300 pixels per inch RGB color. And I'm going to open this up here. And so we've got a white canvas. And so the first thing I do is need to divide this into third panels. So I'm just going to drag out 3 rectangles, and I'm going to just duplicate this and bring it over here, and I'm just going to change the layer opacity of these a little bit so I can see the difference between them. And now I'm just going to duplicate this again, and I'm doing duplicate by hitting Control J or Command J if you were on a Mac. And now I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to put them in a group, and I'm going to do Control T to transform them. So Control T to transform, and I'm going to move this over here, and then I'm going to drag this out to fill my document. Okay, and so there are the bounds of my, those are the columns that I'm going to be working with. Okay, and I don't necessarily have to use these, but they're just going to help me organize my content into the columns so that when I print it, they fall where I want them to. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to create some kind of continuous graphical element across this whole screen. And actually, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to color the background. So I'm going to turn this off for a second, and I'm going to drag a new shape out across my whole document here. And so I'm on just grabbing the square shape. It's on shape. I'm going to do fill. And the fill here, actually, I can adjust by double clicking on this square. And I'm going to double click here and say I want this to be kind of like this aqua blue. And I'm actually going to make it kind of dark because I'm going to add a gradient on top of it. Okay, so that's the color I want for my theme. And I'm going to add a new layer by hitting this little square icon here, and you can see it's added a new layer on top of there. And I'm going to come over here to my gradient tool in the tool panel, and I'm going to change the foreground color to the color I want my gradient to be. So I'm just going to do kind of a similar color gradient here, a little bit different. And you'll see right now it's going to lay a gradient from this color to that color. I don't want that. I want that color to nothing. So I want it to go to transparent, which you can see those checkered boxes. And so I'm just going to make sure it's on a radial gradient here, and I'm going to set the opacity to about 30%. So I'm going to click this, and I'm just going to drag out the gradient, telling it how far I want that gradient to extend. And you can see now I've got a nice soft gradient across the back here. And I'm actually going to make that a little bit more dramatic, so I'm going to undo it and just bump up my opacity a little bit. All right. So I've dragged that out. That looks good. And now I'm going to use that same color to create a shape across this whole thing. And so let's say I want the shape to start over here, and so I'm going to kind of drag this out and maybe bring it over here like this. And I'm going to hit Alt just to truncate off that handlebar, and then I'm going to bring it over here outside the document so I don't see the edges of it. And one thing I just realized that I did was I made this as a path, not as a shape. So I need to set this to shape. And now I need to make a new layer and actually build a shape. So I'm just going to redo that. And I'm just going to drag this out to be a little bit more horizontal there. Okay. All right. And so there's one piece. And now I'm going to do another piece, which is similar down here. And so it doesn't have to match perfectly. And I'll have to modify this depending on what content I decide to put in here. All right. And now this curve looks a little bit weird, so I'm just going to modify that a little bit. All right, and so we could play with that, but I'm going to double click here now and add some drop shadows so that I give a little bit of a sense of depth. So I don't want it to be very distant, but I want it to be pretty big and a little bit higher spread here. Okay, and so that looks pretty good. And now I'm going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to double click on this layer, and I'm going to go to drop shadow, and it should snap it to the same shadows before. Okay, so now I've got some drop shadows. And so if we turn this back on again, we can see what our guides are, so we can kind of see where our content's going to fall. And so now we can go ahead and add some title here. So let's say like, actually I clicked inside that shape. So what it's going to do right now is it's going to start typing inside that shape, and that's not what I want to do. So I'm going to delete that text layer. I'm going to grab it and delete it here. And I'm going to make a new layer to go into so that I'm not typing within the bounds of this text layer, although this shape, although I could. So I'm going to do this and say panel 1, And right now I can't see the text because it's the same color as the shape that I'm over top of. So I'm going to change this up here to white. And now we can modify this text a little bit. Okay, and so one thing I'm going to do, because I want this centered within this panel. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to find the panel that I'm in, and I'm going to hold control and click inside this box. And what I can do is, if I'm on my move tool, I can actually click this thing here, which is center, align the horizontal center, and it's going to align it within my marquee selection. So if I do that, if I click that, it should, oops, I'm on the wrong thing. So I need to select my text and then click this align vertical, and you'll see it'll snap it to the center of that panel. Okay, and so now I can do the same thing. So I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to, oops, I need to grab that layer, and I'm going to see what's happening now. It's on auto select, so I have to uncheck auto select. So I'm going to go here to this, and I'm going to bring it over there, and then over here, and these can be some kind of title organization for my slide, for the column. Okay, and so now that I have these two things, I can actually hide some graphical elements underneath of these to give it a little bit more of a textural depth. So I can, let me see, grab my shape tool here. So let's say I wanted to draw, I don't know, an activator or something. So I'm going to go below here, create a new layer, and you can see I can like draw, you know, just some random shape, whatever you decide that you want. I'm just going to draw something random here, and I'm going to fill that with maybe a different color, you know, whatever we want. So you could put a picture behind here. You could really put whatever you want. So I'm just going to actually pause the video for a minute and grab a picture and put it in there. All right, so we're recording here again. I'm going to delete that layer here, and what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to just put a picture in here, and you can see this picture is behind those two layers. So I can actually like bring this in here and have it bound by this box. So let me just turn these back on, and I'm just going to hit Control T to change the size of this picture a bit so it fills all the way down here. Okay, and I'm going to move this over. Computer's being a little bit slow. All right, and so I'm just going to hit Enter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control click this column, and I'm going to hit Control Shift I, or Command Shift I if you're on a Mac, and then I'm going to hit Delete, and I'm actually going to delete off the edge of the picture. So now you'll see if I turn these off again, we've got continuous graphical elements across this whole slide, the whole brochure, but I'm confining my content to the panel so that it makes sense when it's in a trifold format. And so, of course, you can just follow this kind of technique throughout, and you could even add other things that maybe cross or stay within the bounds to give it a more professional feel. So hopefully that helps you think about how to organize and put together your brochure.